The Galactic Council chamber hummed with quiet arrogance, a symphony of whispered agreements and nods of certainty. Representatives of the most powerful empires in the galaxy sat in their respective seats, their glowing data screens displaying the newest intelligence report. At the center of the Great Hall, Supreme Strategist Varkon of the Tresnak Empire flicked his forked tongue in amusement. Earth, he scoffed, tapping the name on his display. A primitive, warring species incapable of unity. A planet still struggling with its own internal conflicts. Across the chamber, High Scholar Orv of the Zalari leaned back, his bioluminescent skin pulsing with quiet derision. Indeed, their technological progress is sporadic, their civilization divided. They still rely on crude projectile weapons. What threat do they pose to the Council? The discussion continued, the same dismissive conclusions repeated in different variations. Earth, the primitive backwater, was a loose end that needed tying up before its species could disrupt the delicate balance of galactic order. Some argued for surveillance, others for containment, but it was Grand Marshal Zorvan of the Varn Dominion who delivered the final recommendation. Elimination, he stated, his mandibles clicking decisively. Swift planetary bombardment, followed by ground occupation. Their civilizations will collapse within days. A vote was cast. The decision was unanimous. The invasion fleet was assembled within the cycle. Thousands of warships, each carrying elite troops from across the galactic empires, formed an armada unlike any the galaxy had seen in centuries. As they approached the Sol system, expectations were clear. Earth would be crushed. Humanity would kneel. The first wave descended upon the planet with precision, deploying troops into key cities: New York, Beijing, Moscow, London. The command centers anticipated immediate capitulation, but something was wrong. Silence. The cities, once bustling with activity, were eerily still. Streets lay empty, buildings abandoned. Even the humans' archaic data networks had gone dark. There were no cries for mercy, no desperate attempts to communicate, only an unsettling void. Tresnak Commander Salvek led the first unit into the ruins of Times Square, his squad fanning out in search of resistance. Scanners detected no threats. Yet, a growing sense of unease spread through his ranks. "Where are they?" one of his officers murmured. A moment later, the first soldier vanished. No scream, no struggle, just gone. Panic rippled through the unit. Weapons were raised, but targeting systems flickered with static. Motion sensors detected movement, everywhere and nowhere at once. Then, the shadows erupted. Explosions ripped through the alien formations, gunfire echoing like thunder between skyscrapers. The invaders' energy shields flared uselessly against the incoming projectiles. Kinetic rounds, primitive by galactic standards, yet lethal in their simplicity. Plasma weapons were drawn in response, but the humans did not fight like any species the aliens had encountered before. They struck from unseen positions, moved like ghosts, and vanished before retaliation could be mustered. One by one, entire squads were cut down, their final transmissions filled with panic screams and unintelligible static. From orbit, fleet commanders monitored the carnage in disbelief. Tresnak warlords barked for updates. Zalari strategists frantically recalculated probabilities. But the results remained the same. The first wave was not being resisted. It was being hunted. A desperate order was given: deploy reinforcements. More troops flooded the cities, yet the nightmare only deepened. Alien soldiers reported hallucinations, shadows moving without cause, whispers in their own language bleeding through their comms. Their maps led them in circles. Their instruments fed them conflicting data. Every battle was a trap, every engagement a slaughter. By the time the second wave landed, the first was already gone. Panic spread like wildfire through the alien ranks. The first wave was gone, not defeated, not retreating, just gone. Entire battalions had disappeared, leaving behind only broken equipment and flickering distress signals that led nowhere. From orbit, commanders scrambled for explanations. Interference? Some unknown planetary phenomenon? No, the answer was far worse. Humanity had not fled. They had not surrendered. They had been waiting. The second wave landed with caution, deploying heavier firepower, mechanized walkers, and aerial support. If the humans had hidden underground, they would be flushed out. If they had retreated to rural zones, they would be tracked and destroyed. The aliens were done underestimating them. And yet, despite their preparations, they still did not see the attack coming. In the ruins of Beijing, an armored column of Zalari hover tanks pushed through abandoned streets, scanning for signs of movement. Their anti-personnel drones hovered ahead, sweeping buildings with plasma bursts, reducing potential ambush points to rubble. A textbook military operation. And still the ambush came. A single shot rang out. One of the lead tanks jerked violently. Its turret twisted at an unnatural angle. Another shot followed, and the next vehicle in line burst into flames. The Zalari commander, watching from a tactical relay, froze in disbelief. Their tanks had energy shielding, resistant to plasma and disruptor weapons. But this was something different. High-velocity rounds. Kinetic projectiles traveling faster than they could react, piercing armor as if it were paper. Primitive by their calculations, yet brutally effective. The shields were useless. Then, the drones began falling from the sky. Their optical feeds scrambled, sensors blinded, as an unseen electromagnetic pulse surged through their circuits. In moments, an entire mechanized division was deaf, blind, and exposed. And that's when the humans struck. They emerged from the ruins like ghosts, weapons already firing, each shot calculated and precise. Not a single wasted movement, not a single wasted bullet. Alien soldiers fell in seconds, their advanced armor meaningless against the sheer force of high-powered ballistics. No energy beams, no plasma bolts, just lead, steel, and fire. A Tresnak officer managed to return fire, unleashing a concentrated plasma barrage into a crumbling office tower. The structure collapsed in a cloud of dust and flame, crushing dozens of enemy combatants beneath it. For a moment, he allowed himself to believe they had gained ground. Then, the screaming began. Through the smoke, shadows moved, not fleeing, advancing. Humans in full combat gear, moving without hesitation, eyes locked onto their targets with terrifying intensity. They did not stop. They did not break ranks. The officers saw one take a direct plasma shot to the chest. He staggered, exhaled sharply, and kept moving, armor still intact. Another dived to the debris, rolling into cover before launching a projectile that arced unnaturally through the air. It landed in the heart of an alien squad, detonating in a spray of shrapnel. The soldiers didn't just die. They were torn apart. Something was wrong. This wasn't just resistance. This was precision warfare. The realization sank in too late. The second wave was crumbling just as fast as the first. Across the battlefield, the same pattern emerged. Aliens moving in force, only to be led into dead zones. Conflicting data, malfunctioning targeting systems. Every attempt at retaliation met with a response they could neither predict nor counter. And above them, in the black void of space, the fleet commanders finally understood. They weren't fighting an underdeveloped species. They were fighting apex predators. Predators who had spent their entire existence warring against themselves, who had mastered the art of psychological warfare, electronic deception, and asymmetrical combat, who did not fight like any civilized species in the galaxy. They fought like monsters. Desperate to regain control, the Galactic Council authorized full planetary bombardment. If Earth could not be conquered, it would be reduced to ash. Orbital weapons charged. The order was given, and nothing happened. The fleet's weapon systems flickered offline. Shields collapsed. Engines failed to respond. Somewhere, unseen in the void, Earth had already made its next move. Alarms blared across every warship in the invasion fleet. Systems flickered, rebooted, then died again. 1,000 warning lights flashed red across control panels, and fleet commanders barked frantic orders that went unheard. The mighty war machines of the Galactic Council had been silenced. Admiral Xeric of the Zalari Empire slammed his fist against the command console, his bioluminescent skin pulsing in erratic distress patterns. Status report. What just happened? His officers scrambled through malfunctioning interfaces, their panic growing with every failed system check. Admiral, all primary weapons are offline. Targeting systems unresponsive. Shield generators have been compromised. Another officer gasped. Sir, we've lost propulsion. We're dead in space. Xeric's mandibles clenched in disbelief. An entire fleet, millions of tons of warships, the finest technology the galaxy had to offer, crippled in an instant. But how? It was Grand Marshal Zorvan of the Varn Dominion, who finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. They knew we were coming, and they had prepared. Across the crippled armada, alien crews fought desperately to restore power. Some attempted to launch distress signals. None got through. Communications were jammed by an unseen force, cutting off all contact between ships. Then, without warning, the first warship detonated. A brilliant explosion tore through the silent void, consuming an entire dreadnought in a cascade of fire and debris. The shock wave rippled through the formation, sending panic through the ranks. It hadn't been an internal failure. It hadn't been sabotage from within. It had been an attack. Admiral Xeric barely had time to process it before another ship erupted into flames. Then another, and another. A silent predator was hunting them from the darkness. Desperate, he turned to his second-in-command. Where's the enemy fire coming from? I want a counterstrike now. But no coordinates came. There were no energy signatures, no incoming projectiles, only ships vanishing in bursts of destruction as if being struck by ghosts. Then came the first transmission, not from the fleet, from Earth. A voice, calm, deliberate, and unmistakably human. It echoed across every ship, across every broken communication channel. Welcome to Earth. A long pause. Then, with cold amusement, you thought we'd let you invade without a fight? Across the fleet, fear became something else entirely. Horror. The aliens had come expecting primitive resistance. They had not expected this. Humanity was not just fighting back. Humanity was winning. The realization hit hard. Earth had hacked them. Their fleets, their weapons, their very ability to fight, all compromised before the first shot was ever fired. The fleet commanders had assumed humanity's technological progress was erratic, inefficient, but they had misunderstood entirely. Humanity hadn't needed to match them in firepower. They had outthought them. A Tresnak officer, voice trembling, whispered what many now feared. We never had a chance. And for the first time in recorded history, the Galactic Council faced an enemy they could not comprehend. Silence consumed the remains of the once mighty invasion fleet. Where there had been confidence and certainty, now only terror remained. The Galactic Council's greatest warships, paralyzed, vulnerable, dying one by one. Admiral Xeric watched helplessly as another capital ship detonated in eerie silence, its hull splitting apart like fragile glass. No visible projectiles, no enemy signatures, just death. His mind raced. This wasn't war. This was extermination. And the worst part? Humanity had never given them a chance. The fleet had been defeated before it had even fired its first shot. Then the voice returned. Cold, unshaken. Human, this is your only warning. The word sent a ripple of dread through every surviving crew member. You are not the first to come here. You will not be the last. But understand this. Earth is not a prize to be taken. It is a graveyard for those who try. Every fleet commander listened in stunned silence. Leave now, if you can. A moment later, control panels flickered to life. Power partially returned to the remaining warships. Weapons stayed offline, but propulsion systems, just enough to retreat, reactivated. It was no act of mercy. It was a message. The surviving commanders did not hesitate. The fleet, once poised to burn Earth to the ground, turned and fled. Not with honor, not with defiance, with terror. As the warships limped into the void, battered and humiliated, the Galactic Council would try to rationalize their failure. They would tell themselves it was a fluke, an anomaly, that Earth had only won through deception. But deep down, in the place where fear festers, they knew the truth. Humanity had never been weak. They had never been primitive. They had simply been waiting for the moment when the galaxy would be foolish enough to come knocking. And now, that moment had passed. The Galactic Council had sent an armada to conquer Earth. Instead, they had learned a lesson that would echo for generations, a warning that would spread across the stars. You do not invade Earth. You survive it, if you're lucky,